It's been almost 3 years exactly since Cristiano Ronaldo's high-profile move to the Middle East, beginning the Saudi League experiment, and more importantly, starting the rise again of the bag chasers. Like its Chinese predecessor before, the staggeringly high wages on offer from the small Gulf nation would start to prick the ears of many young footballers from across Europe. Just a month of playing in Saudi Arabia would essentially set these footballers and their families up for life. The wages were crazy. A quick glance at leading wage tracking websites puts the annual average salary of a Saudi League footballer at around €5 million. It's hard to say no to that kind of wealth, but they should, right? Football is a sport. It's entertainment first, it's business venture second. Football's the love of the game, that's why people play it. Any monetary value created from it is just a secondary thing that just happened to come about afterwards. When the majority of us first started playing football, it was done in the cheapest boots our parents could afford, in a jersey that had a 50-50 chance of it being a fake, 100% if it was bought abroad on holidays. But that's the nature of the game. Except it's not anymore, is it? We've domesticated the sport, culling itself from the rawness of the street and the playground, and instead warping itself into something that looks like football, but isn't quite. The Industrial Revolution that kicked the sport into motion also kicked the sport out of its own roots, letting historic local teams get bought out by foreign consortiums and tech bro billionaires. The clubs had no real choice but to let itself get dragged through the changes and to slowly adapt into what they thought the sport should be. Local and historic clubs have been gentrified into brands, fashion labels, and all-inclusive holiday packages to countries that deny genocide. The game we played in our back gardens and the game that gets played in stadiums are miles apart now. However, it's hard to argue these are wholly bad changes though. At least from a footballing competition side. Teams became much more competitive, cross-European competitions grew in stature, and players were able to gain a wage that was directly related to their own abilities. Something that we don't actually see in the real world, kind of at all. The difference between winning and losing in football is worth millions. So when players are directly able to influence this, they are compensated for it. It's kind of fair. Purchase and product. It's just business with a few more zeros on the end of each contract. Just capitalism doing its thing, really. However, unlike most professions, footballers are heavily chastised for the wages that they earn. And sure, when you look at it on paper and see the millions of pounds a year they're making, it does give you that little sicky feeling. Are they really worth that much? Am I in the wrong profession? Should I have made my dad Project Mbappe me? But I'm going to do something brave here, something unheard of. I'm going to defend these contracts. Not in some weird little right-wing way though, don't worry. More in some kind of Marxist, value of labor, production type shit. Employment has always been a prominent rung on the class warfare ladder. Just as a fundamental rule of capitalism, employers have to pay you less than what you're actually worth in order to generate a profit. Marxism 101, baby communism, we were all teenagers in 2020 at some point, we know this shit. If you were to get paid exactly what you're worth, then how on earth will the poor shareholders get their dividends? Come on guys. Oh, will someone please think of the poor shareholders? However, football might be one of the only professions where the employees hold considerably more power than their employers, and the employers are fearful of that. Football clubs are just completely dependent on their players to generate any form of revenue. TV rights deals, you need good enough players to stay in the division. Merchandise sales, you need players people want to have on the back of their shirt. Competition prize money. Daniel Levy's not fucking tying up his laces against Real Madrid. And to caveat that joke, this essay was written in February 2025. That's not happening anytime soon. Am I right? Football players are everything to a club. It's why hundreds of millions of pounds are spent every year on just a couple of guys. If you want to make millions in revenue, then get prepared to spend that much. Granted, a lot of that fee is amortized over a long contract, but the point still remains. You want to make big, you have to spend big. And that relates to players' contracts too. Sure, you might be able to snag a young prospect on smaller wages at the start, but once they start performing and creating value for your club, you're going to have to offer them more or risk losing them to a team who can afford to. Success is rewarded immediately. If you're good at your job, you get paid what you're worth. There's no fucking performance reviews. And this stacks over trophies won, competitions qualified to, or even just avoiding relegation. If your team succeeds based on your efforts, everyone succeeds and you're rewarded for it. It's one of the only employment models that guarantees promotion based on your skill set. Plus, that's saying nothing to the billionaire owners that these clubs seem to entice, like rats to a pizza slice. Is there anything more ethical than taking millions off an oligarch's back pocket in a loss-making venture? I don't think so. Especially when these wages help hundreds of players rise their family, friends and themselves out of poverty. If anything, it's only right that these football players demand millions from their employers. Every 7-figure deal that goes to a football player is 7 figures lost to Lockheed Martin. Proletariat uprising begins with players. Maybe. And that leads us back to the Saudi Pro League. If the Premier League is a simulation of the grassroots game, the Saudi Pro League is a simulacra. If you were to strip down the game from any connections to grassroots culture, working class people, and even just historic local venues, you'll get the SPL. These are football clubs owned and ran directly by the monarchy. There is no ties to any working class culture here. The Saudi Arabian Football Federation make no attempts to entice players to the league through any promises of competition wins, silverware, trophies. It's all about the shmoney, baby. Erling Haaland's 9-year, 500,000 quid a week deal at Man City is the highest wage ever offered in the Premier League. It's money that only ever comes from being the best or there and around the conversation. It also wouldn't break the top 5 contracts in the Saudi League alone. Ivan Toney is one of the most recent transfers to this Gulf nation, a transfer that left a lot of fans confused. He had just broken into the England squad and kind of cemented himself as one of the top finishers in the world. What the hell is he doing in Saudi Arabia? Why on earth did he leave Europe at the top of his powers? Well, the answer is obvious. 400,000 quid a week, tax-free. Tony spent the majority of his career bouncing around on loan in the lower divisions of English football. By the time he broke into the Premier League, he was earning considerably less than basically everyone else in the squad. The only first-team player he made more than was Kevin Schade, who had just signed for the club and was 5 years his junior. The year before his last, Tony was the 3rd top scorer in the Premier League. It's fair to say he was being paid what he was worth. And like we said before, if you can't afford to pay a player more, someone else will come knocking. On top of all that, he was 27, an age most Premier League scouts avoid searching for, and he just spent 8 months out, suspended for a betting scandal. If you're in that position at any job, would you take the 400,000 offer? Many teachers, especially in my home country of Ireland, migrate overseas to Dubai for a few years, where the wages on offer are considerably higher than what our government can offer. And again, this is not me endorsing Dubai or any of these Middle Eastern nations that, were built on slave labor. What I am saying though is when it comes to being paid more, wages on offer, it's very hard to say no to these kind of contracts. Is expecting these players, many of which come from very, very poor backgrounds, to turn down generational wealth really a fair ask? The journey to make it in the game requires a sacrifice of your long-term future. University's out of the question. A footballer is an all or nothing career. So when these footballers retire in their early 30s, their money has to last. If they can't find a job in the industry, such as punditry or coaching or even the admin side of the game, then many have to start their careers over from zero. That's tough. Could you reinvent yourself after 2 decades living out your dreams? However, we still need to recognize the drawbacks of such a move. Don't worry, this is not an endorsement of the Middle East, or more specifically, the monarchies and the slave labor that have built it to what it is today. Saudi Arabia's attempts to sports wash their regime by bringing in top-level players is a topic that deserves more scrutiny in a separate essay, but I'll still touch on it here because it is very important. The wage gap between the goal scorers they employ and the slaves that built their stadiums is night and day, and not something that can be brushed off with a catch-all. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. It is a genuine thing to bring up and to be scrutinized over. It is still a choice to accept the money built off the backs and debts of thousands of migrant workers. And that's not even mentioning the discrimination women and LGBTQIA people face in the country every single day. This should be the driving discussion behind a footballer's choice to move to the Middle East, but it's not. Instead, every time a player of a decent caliber moves over to Saudi Arabia, the discussion is less about the ethical dilemmas of it and more about them giving away the legacy in the sport or not competing for silverware. Things that are not nearly as important as mentioning the human rights injustices in these countries. The only time I've actually seen this criticism in the mainstream public was when Jordan Henderson moved to Al Ettifaq, and even then it was seen more as a gotcha moment, considering his work on the Remolaces campaign, than it was a genuine criticism of his move. Major publications focused in on that, while ignoring every other player that had moved over in the same window. Arguments against the Saudi League's poaching of talent from Europe are entertainment centered, not morally centered. It's why the main criticism of most Saudi League transfers focus on the what ifs of player potential and nothing else. If only he didn't spend his final years in Saudi Arabia chasing that bag. If only he didn't move so early in his career, what he could be. Nothing to say about the ethical dilemma of them making the move in the first place. These criticisms all lead back to money as a destructive force in the entertainment of the sport. Money entices players to switch teams and be allured to pastures new. And this is unacceptable for fans. The vast majority of footballers believe it is a privilege for you, the humble footballer, to play for their team, the team that they grew up supporting throughout their entire life, the team that they wish they could play for themselves. You're supposed to rise up through the ranks of your boyhood club, reject all offers from outside, and retire in the same club you started with. It's the unwritten law of football. But again, translate that to any other career and it's laughable. I don't owe my job the next 15 years of my employment purely because I was born near the company. If I turned down a job that offered me triple my wages and a house in the capital of Spain, I'd be considered a fucking idiot for not doing it. If I stayed in my hometown all my life and never left my house, I'd be considered a loser. Again, football's an incredibly short career with little to no transferable skills later on in life. It's one of the only professions you actively get worse at the longer you do it for. Every year is a battle for your own starting spot against younger, hungrier, and more techier teammates. And at any point, you could receive an injury that could just completely derail your entire season, if not your whole career. Not to mention having to perform in front of tens of thousands of the most fickle, volatile fans every single week. With all that taken into account, is it such a problem that we allow footballers to treat your entertainment as just a job to them? Are we being too harsh on allowing players to accept bigger contracts away from the club in order just to maximize their own life? Should we expect every non-English footballer to hold your hometown's team with the same revere as you do? Football is one of the only careers out there that pays their players a fair wage relative to what they bring in for the company. So let footballers chase the bag. It's only fair. Side note, side tangent, off script time. This video is more about the way we treat these transfers, the way we treat players for trying to gain more money, trying to effectively promote themselves from within. How the conversation of moving for money in football is a negative thing in comparison to moving jobs, getting promotions, moving outside your own country to try new experiences. I think there is so much more to be said about footballers taking the money from Saudi Arabian billionaires and using it to better their own lives, while directly affecting the lives of thousands of migrant workers and profiting off their own debts. Obviously, there's much to be said about the fact that billionaires of English football clubs are pretty much doing the same thing with sweatshop workers in parts of Asia, and with the general fact that billionaires exploit every fucking person under the sun. It's an interesting topic to discuss further, which I will probably do a follow-up on, about the ethical ramifications of players moving abroad to take the bag of Saudi Arabian billionaires and the monarchy. You know, how ethical is it to take them, considering the money that they use to raise themselves out of poverty is the same money that killed people in poverty. I'd love to write more about this. I hope you enjoyed. I am fully aware that I have not touched enough on a lot of these topics. I'd love to explore them further. Please don't crucify me. That'd be nice. I'm filming this on Easter, so, you know, crucifixion's in the air. But yeah, I wrote this a year ago and I just want to make it into a video now. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope I was articulate enough. And I would love to do more follow-ups. Thank you for watching.